just a housewife." Those words hung in the air like poison as I stood frozen in the doorway of my husband's office, a manila folder of signed purchase documents hidden in my designer tote. Olivia, Nathan's secretary of 2 years, didn't notice. "Me?" She was too busy running her manicured hand over her slightly protruding belly, while Nathan nodded sympathetically across his mahogany desk. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." "Nathan, she's just a housewife," Olivia continued, her voice dripping with dismissal. "She has no idea how business works. You said it yourself. She hasn't worked in a decade. She spends her days redecorating and planning dinner parties while you built an empire." My husband, my partner of 15 years, didn't defend me. Instead, he sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Thalia isn't stupid, Olivia. She just lives in a different world. I've kept her comfortable, protected." I clutched the folder tighter, the irony of the moment almost making me laugh out loud. If only they knew I had just left the bank where I'd finalized the private purchase of the Harrington Building, the very building housing Nathan's precious Miller Development Group offices. The building he'd been trying desperately to buy for months. My phone vibrated silently in my pocket. Diana Rodriguez, my lawyer, confirming the transaction was complete. I didn't need to check it. I already knew. I backed away silently, neither of them ever realizing I had been there. In my car, I placed the folder carefully on the passenger seat and started the engine of my understated luxury sedan. My hands didn't shake. My breathing remained even. The calm that enveloped me wasn't from shock. It was from confirmation. The pieces had finally fallen into place. My name is Thalia Everett Miller, and until 3 months ago, I believed I was living the American dream. I grew up in Westlake, a coastal city with enough charm to keep tourists coming but enough industry to keep the economy strong. My parents were educators who raised me to believe that intelligence was my greatest asset. I graduated with honors, earned my MBA from Northwestern, and landed a coveted position at Lancaster Financial, where I specialized in commercial real estate investments. That's where I met Nathan Miller, ambitious, charismatic, determined to make his mark on the world through his development company. When we married, it made perfect sense for one of us to maintain a steady career, while the other took the entrepreneurial risk. So when Ethan came along, we made a calculated decision. Nathan would continue building his business, and I would step back to raise our son. It was never about becoming just a housewife. It was a strategic family decision, one I embraced, fully. What appeared to outsiders as lunches with other wealthy wives and charity committee meetings were actually carefully maintained networking opportunities. I kept my financial knowledge sharp, maintained my professional connections, and quietly managed our family's personal investments separate from Nathan's business. That Tuesday morning had begun like any other. I prepared Ethan's lunch, quizzing him on multiplication tables as he ate his breakfast. After dropping him at Westlake Preparatory, I stopped for coffee at Blue Water Cafe, where I noticed Nathan's business partner, Thomas Warren, having an intense conversation with a man I recognized as a local bank executive. "The Harrington deal is slipping through your fingers," the banker was saying. "Miller and Warren doesn't have the capital, and your credit lines are maxed. If you lose that building—" "We're not losing anything," Thomas interrupted, his voice tight. "Nathan has a plan." I sipped my latte, my interest piqued. The Harrington Building was prime real estate in the business district and happened to house my husband's company offices. Nathan had mentioned wanting to purchase it months ago, calling it a game-changing acquisition, but I hadn't heard any updates since. Curious, I texted Nathan, "How's the Harrington Building situation?" His response came quickly. "Don't worry about boring business stuff. Are we still on for dinner at Salvatore's tonight?" Dismissive, evasive, so typical lately. I paid for my coffee and drove to my next appointment. Not a spa day or shopping trip, but a meeting with Grace Chen, my former colleague from Lancaster Financial, who now ran her own advisory firm. We'd been meeting monthly for years, but our recent sessions had taken on new urgency. "The private auction for the Harrington Building is happening in 3 weeks," Grace said, sliding documents across her desk. "My source confirms the current owner is motivated to sell quickly and quietly." I reviewed the paperwork. "And Coastal Investments is prepared to make the bid?" Coastal was the shell company Grace had helped me establish years ago, my separate financial identity Nathan knew nothing about. "Everything's in place," Grace confirmed. "But Thalia, are you sure about this? Once we make this move, there's no going back. Nathan will know." I thought about the late-night calls Nathan had been taking in his study, the unexplained weekend business trips, the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his suits, the way he'd been emotionally absent even when physically present. "I'm sure," I said. "If my suspicions are wrong, I'll have made a solid investment. If they're right." I let the sentence hang. Grace nodded. "The funds from your family trust and your personal investment portfolio give us enough for the down payment. The rest will come from the investment group, as discussed." I signed the preliminary documents. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protection, insurance. If my marriage was as solid as I'd once believed, this would simply be a sound financial move. If not, I'd be prepared. That evening at Salvatore's, Nathan was charming, attentive, the man I'd fallen in love with. He ordered my favorite wine, asked about Ethan's science project, and seemed genuinely interested in my day. "Did you have a good day?" he asked, reaching across the table to take my hand. I smiled. "Very productive." "That's my girl," he said, "always keeping busy." The condescension in his tone was subtle, but unmistakable, as if my days were filled with trivial pursuits while he tackled the important work of empire building. "How about you?" I asked. "Any news on the Harrington Building?" His expression flickered, surprise, then careful neutrality. "Some complications. Nothing for you to worry about." "If you need to talk it through—" "Thalia," he interrupted gently, "you've been out of the business world for a decade. These are complex negotiations. Let me handle it." I nodded, swallowing both my advice and my anger. The Nathan I'd married would have valued my expertise, not dismissed it. Over the next 2 weeks, I noticed Nathan's increasing stress. He came home later each night, his temper shorter, his attention scattered. Twice, I overheard him arguing, with Thomas on the phone about financing options. Meanwhile, I continued my preparations with Grace and Diana Rodriguez, the sharp-minded attorney who'd been my silent advisor for months. "The auction is secured," Diana confirmed during our meeting. At her office, Coastal Investments is positioned as the primary bidder. The current owner appreciates the clean offer. No contingencies, no financing delays. "And Nathan's company?" I asked. Diana's expression was carefully professional. "Miller and Warren Development submitted a bid, but it's contingent on financing. They haven't secured. The owner isn't interested in waiting." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and vindication. "What happens after we acquire the building?" "As the new owner, you'll have several options," Diana explained. "You could maintain their current lease, negotiate new terms, or give notice to vacate," I finished. "Yes. But that decision doesn't need to be made immediately." On the day of the auction, I told Nathan I was taking Ethan to visit my parents for the weekend. Instead, I dropped Ethan with my trusted friend Marisa and checked into the Westlake Grand Hotel, where I waited for news from Diana. At 3:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text. "Coastal Investments has secured the Harrington Building. Congratulations on your new acquisition. I ordered room service champagne and toasted my reflection in the mirror. Phase 1 complete. The following Monday, I returned to my routine as if nothing had changed. Nathan remained oblivious, though increasingly agitated about business matters. When he canceled our anniversary dinner citing an emergency meeting with investors, I didn't protest. Instead, I used the opportunity to access his home office. We'd always respected each other's spaces, but the rules had changed. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for, a small velvet box hidden in his desk drawer. Not for me, as our anniversary would have warranted, but containing a pair of emerald earrings with a small card. For my Olivia, who gives me strength. And beside it lay a sonogram image dated 3 weeks earlier. I photographed everything, returned the items exactly as I'd found them, and closed the drawer. No tears came, only a cold clarity. The next morning, I dressed with particular care. A sleek charcoal pantsuit I hadn't worn in years, subtle makeup, my grandmother's pearls. After dropping Ethan at school, I drove downtown to the Harrington Building for my appointed meeting with the property management company. That's when I overheard Olivia's dismissive words. That's when I learned exactly what my husband thought of me. Just a housewife he had kept comfortable. As I pulled away from the building, my phone rang. It was Grace. "Is it done?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "And now I know exactly what comes next." I drove to Diana's office with the folder of finalized purchase documents. It was time for Phase 2. "The notification to all building tenants about the change in ownership will go out tomorrow," Diana confirmed. "Nathan will receive it along with everyone else." "Perfect," I said. "And the other preparations?" Diana handed me another folder. "All documented. The separate bank accounts are established. Your trust has been restructured as we discussed. The lakeside property has been transferred solely to your name." I hadn't told Diana everything I'd discovered, but as a divorce attorney, with 20 years of experience, she understood what was happening. "Thalia," she said gently, "whatever you decide, you're protected now." That evening, when Nathan came home, I was sitting in the living room reviewing Ethan's homework as usual. Nothing in my demeanor suggested that anything had changed. "Rough day," he muttered, loosening his tie. "The investors are getting cold feet." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said mildly. "Dinner's in the warming drawer." He paused, studying me. "You seem different." I smiled. "Just focused on Ethan's math. Test tomorrow." Later, as Nathan showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't need to look. I already knew what I would find. Instead, I slipped into bed and pretended to be asleep when he emerged from the bathroom. He checked his phone, typed a quick response, and then slid beside me without a word. In the darkness, I allowed myself one silent tear. Not for the marriage I was losing, but for the one I had thought I had all along. The next morning, I made breakfast as usual. Nathan was distracted, checking his phone repeatedly while gulping. "Down coffee." "I'll be late tonight," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Major issues at work." "Anything I can help with?" I asked, knowing full well what the day would bring him. He shook his head, already heading for the door. "Nothing for you to worry about." After dropping Ethan at school, I drove to the Blue Water Cafe and ordered my usual latte. At precisely 10:30 a.m., my phone rang, Diana's office. "It's been delivered," her assistant confirmed. All tenant notifications were sent by courier this morning. I sipped my coffee and waited. At 10:47, my phone lit up with Nathan's name. I let it ring through to voicemail. A text followed immediately. "Call me. Emergency." I finished my coffee, paid the bill, and drove unhurriedly to Diana's office where we had scheduled an 11:30 meeting. My phone continued to buzz with Nathan's increasingly frantic messages. "Thalia, someone bought the Harrington Building. We need to talk. Are you ignoring me? This is serious. Call me immediately. At Diana's office, I finally returned his call, putting it on speaker so Diana could witness the conversation. Nathan, hi. Sorry, I was in a yoga class. What's going on? What's going on? He nearly shouted. The building's been sold. Some investment group no one's ever heard of. We could be evicted, Thalia. Do you understand what that means for the company? That sounds stressful, I replied calmly. When did this happen? I just got the notice an hour ago. I'm trying to reach the new owners, but no one knows anything about Coastal Investments. It's like they appeared out of nowhere. I caught Diana's eye. She gave me a small nod. Coastal Investments? I repeated. That sounds familiar. A pause. How would you know anything about them? Nathan, I said quietly, we need to talk, but not over the phone. Meet me at Westlake Grand, room 7112, 1 hour. I don't have time for… Make time, I interrupted, then ended the call. Diana handed me a folder containing copies of everything, the property purchase documents, the financial records I'd gathered, photos of the gifts and sonogram, bank statements showing suspicious withdrawals from our joint accounts. Are you sure about this? Approach? She asked. We could proceed directly with divorce filings. I shook my head. I want to see his face when he realizes who he's been dismissing all these years. When I arrived at the hotel room, I arranged the documents carefully on the desk. I wore the same power suit from the day before, my armor, for the conversation ahead. Nathan arrived 17 minutes late, his face flushed with agitation. He burst into the room without so much as a greeting. What are we doing here? I need to be at the office dealing with this nightmare. Sit down, Nathan. Something in my tone made him pause. He glanced around the hotel room, confusion replacing anger. What is this? This, I said, indicating the chair across from E, is a conversation long overdue. He sat reluctantly, loosening his tie. Thalia, I don't have time for mystery games. The company is in crisis. Yes, I know. I slid the property purchase document across the desk. Coastal Investments. Does the name still just sound familiar? He glanced at the document, then back at me, uncomprehending. I'm Coastal Investments, Nathan. The color drained from his face. What? I purchased the Harrington Building 3 days ago. The deed transferred yesterday. He stared at the document, then at me, disbelief, warring with confusion. That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. You don't know how to… I don't know how to what? I interrupted. Structure a commercial real estate acquisition? Establish an investment corporation? Negotiate financing with private equity partners? Strange, considering that's exactly what I did at Lancaster Financial before we decided I would stay home with Ethan. He shook his head, as if trying to clear it. This doesn't make sense. Our money is tied up in the business. In the house. How could you possibly afford… Our money is tied up in your business, I corrected. The money from my family trust, my pre-marriage investments, and the portfolio I've quietly managed for the past decade. That money is now tied up in your office building. Comprehension dawned slowly on his face, quickly followed by anger. You went behind my back? You deliberately sabotaged my company? Is that how it feels, Nathan? To have someone you trusted make life-altering decisions without consulting you? To discover the person sharing your bed has been living a double life? His expression froze. What are you talking about? I slid across the photo of the emerald, earrings and sonogram. Olivia seems nice, though I have to say her assessment of me as just a housewife was rather hurtful. Nathan's face went from pale to ashen. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice steady despite the pain lancing through me. I understand that while I was raising our son and managing our home, you were starting a new family with your secretary. I understand that you've been using our joint funds to finance your affair. And I understand that you've been lying to me for months, possibly years. He slumped back in his chair, the fight draining from him. How long have you known? I suspected for months, but suspicion isn't the same as confirmation. I tapped the folder. Now I have confirmation. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, his wedding ring catching the light. The same ring I'd placed on his finger while promising forever. What happens now? He asked quietly. You own the building, so what? You evict us? Destroy the business? Out of spite? I haven't decided yet, I said truthfully. That depends on how we handle what comes next. And what comes next? I placed another document on the desk, this one prepared by Diana. Divorce papers. I'm giving you the courtesy of reviewing them privately before they're officially filed. He didn't touch them. Thalia, we can work through this. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but 15 years of marriage ended the moment you decided to start a family with another woman, I finished. This isn't a negotiation, Nathan. It's a notification. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. The business won't survive a divorce scandal right now. We're already on shaky ground with investors. And Ethan, have you thought about what this will do to him? I've thought of nothing else, I said, my composure finally cracking. While you were building your precious empire and your secret life, I was protecting our son, emotionally and financially. Don't you dare question my concern for Ethan. Nathan stared at the divorce papers, reality finally sinking in. I can't believe you did this. Buying the building. It's so calculated. So cold. I laughed without humor. As opposed to impregnating your secretary while married, that's the picture of warmth and consideration. He had no answer for that. You have 24 hours to review these papers with your attorney, I said, standing. After that, Diana files them with the court. As for Miller and Warren's lease, you'll receive formal communication about that next week. I gathered my belongings, leaving the documents on the desk. Nathan remained seated, looking suddenly smaller than the larger-than-life businessman I'd married. At the door, I paused. One more thing, Nathan. He looked up, his expression hollow. When you and Olivia were discussing me yesterday, when you called me protected and comfortable, you should know I heard every word. I was standing in your doorway, holding the building purchase documents you thought were beyond my capability to understand. His eyes widened with the realization. I was never just a housewife, I said quietly. I was your partner, your equal. You just forgot that somewhere along the way. I closed the door behind me, walked to the elevator, and pressed the button for the lobby. My hands weren't shaking. My breathing remained even. The future stretched before me, uncertain, but undeniably mine. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Next steps? I smiled. There would be challenges ahead. Telling Ethan, navigating the divorce, rebuilding my professional identity. But for the first time in months, I felt completely clear about who I was and what I was capable of. I typed my response, moving forward. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Lake Haven, my family's cabin nestled in the pines 30 miles outside Westlake. I sat on the deck, laptop open, reviewing documents that told the story of my marriage's slow unraveling and my methodical response to it. This quiet retreat, a property Nathan had always seen as a sentimental indulgence rather than an asset, had become my war room over the past 4 months. It had all started with a misplaced receipt. I found it while organizing Nathan's closet. During our annual spring cleaning ritual, a habit he teased me about but secretly appreciated. The small slip of paper had fallen from his suit jacket pocket, a hotel charge from the Westbrook downtown. Room service for 2, champagne, and a substantial spa credit. The date caught my attention immediately. February 14th, Valentine's Day, a day Nathan had claimed to be stranded in Seattle due to weather delays. I remembered that day vividly. I'd prepared an elaborate dinner for when he returned home, only to receive his apologetic call about canceled flights. I'd eaten alone, sent him photos of his Valentine's gift, and listened patiently as he lamented missing our tradition, all while he was minutes away, in a luxury hotel suite with someone else. I slipped the receipt back exactly where I'd found it and closed the closet door. That night, I lay beside my husband, studying his sleeping profile in the dim light filtering through our curtains, and made a decision. I would not react. Not yet. I needed to know more. The next morning, I woke before dawn and made a call to an old friend from business school, Meredith Hawkins, now a private investigator specializing in financial fraud. "Thalia Everett," she'd exclaimed. "It's been ages. What's the occasion?" "I need your professional services," I said quietly, standing in our backyard garden where Nathan wouldn't overhear. Discretion is essential. Over coffee at a cafe 20 miles from Westlake, I explained my suspicions. Meredith listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, taking minimal notes. "Do you want surveillance?" she asked finally. "Photos? Evidence of the affair?" I shook my head. "No. I need information about our finances. Every account, every transaction, every asset, including ones I might not know about." Meredith raised an eyebrow. "That's not the typical request when infidelity is suspected." "I'm not interested in catching them together," I explained. "I want to understand exactly where we stand financially before making any decisions." And so began the systematic audit of my married life. While maintaining my daily routines, Ethan's school activities, household management, community engagements, I was simultaneously building a comprehensive picture of our true financial situation. The results were illuminating. Nathan had indeed been withdrawing funds from our joint accounts, small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums. He'd opened a separate credit card I hadn't known about, with charges at jewelry stores, upscale restaurants, and weekend getaways. Most concerning, he'd taken a second mortgage on our vacation property in Aspen without my knowledge, forging my signature on the documents. When I confronted Meredith with this discovery, she nodded grimly. "It's more common than you'd think. Spouses falsifying signatures, especially when they handle most of the financial matters." "I have an MBA," I reminded her. "Nathan doesn't handle our finances. We establish them together." "And yet," she pointed out gently, "when was the last time you reviewed your investment portfolios? The property titles? The business holdings?" She was right, of course. Somewhere along the way, I'd relinquished financial oversight to focus on family life. It was a gradual surrender I hadn't even noticed happening. No more. With Meredith's help, I began restructuring my financial life. First, I established a separate bank account at a different institution than the one Nathan and I used, transferring funds from my personal inheritance that had remained untouched in our joint portfolio. Next, I contacted my family's longtime attorney, requesting copies of my parents' trust documents, the trust that had provided my initial investment in Nathan's business. What I discovered sent a chill through me. The terms of my parents' trust specified that any business investment made with trust funds would remain solely in my name, with profits shared according to specific terms. Nathan had never formally purchased my shares as he'd claimed. Instead, he'd simply started operating as if he were the sole owner, redirecting my profit disbursements back into the company without proper documentation. In other words, I still owned 30% of Miller & Warren Development Group. "This is significant," Diana Rodriguez told me during our first consultation. I'd sought her out specifically because she specialized in high-asset divorces and had a reputation for meticulous attention to detail. "Have you confronted him about this discrepancy?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to understand the full picture first." Diana nodded approvingly. "Smart. Most clients come to me after the emotional confrontation, when assets have been hidden or moved. You're giving us a strategic advantage." Over the next weeks, I met with Diana in carefully scheduled appointments that appeared on my calendar as yoga class or volunteer committee. Together, we mapped out a comprehensive plan to secure my financial future regardless of what happened with my marriage. The goal isn't to punish Nathan, I explained to Diana. It's to protect myself and Ethan. Even so, Diana cautioned, once Nathan realizes what you've discovered, he may become defensive, even hostile. Men like your husband, successful, controlling, don't respond well to losing the upper hand. I thought about Nathan's reaction. When his business plans were challenged, his thinly veiled condescension when I offered advice, his increasing secrecy about company matters. Diana was right. His ego wouldn't allow him to accept defeat gracefully, which is why I needed leverage. The Harrington Building opportunity emerged during a casual lunch with Grace Chen. We'd maintained our friendship since our days at Lancaster. Financial, meeting monthly to discuss investment strategies, one of the few professional connections I'd preserved after becoming a full-time mother. The Harrington's coming up for private sale, Grace mentioned while we reviewed portfolio. Performances. Prime commercial property, fully leased, excellent location. The owner's relocating to Europe and wants a quiet, quick transaction before announcing publicly. Isn't that where Nathan's offices are located? She added, watching my expression. Carefully. I kept my face neutral. Yes, it is. Nathan mentioned wanting to purchase it eventually. Grace leaned forward. The current owner's asking price is aggressive but fair, given the market. If Nathan's company is interested, they should move quickly. I stirred my tea thoughtfully. What would it take for a private investor to acquire it instead? Grace's eyes widened slightly before her professional mask returned. Hypothetically, approximately 30% down, with financing for the remainder. The right investor, group could make it happen within weeks. That evening, I casually asked Nathan about his expansion plans over dinner. Any progress on buying the Harrington Building? I kept my tone light, conversational. Nathan frowned, swirling his wine. Market's not right. We're focusing on the Riverside development instead. A smooth lie, delivered without hesitation. I wondered how many similar falsehoods I'd accepted over the years, mistaking his confidence for truth. The next day, I visited my parents' lake house alone. In the small home office that had once been my father's refuge, I opened the ancient safe hidden behind a landscape painting, a hiding place Nathan had always found amusingly old-fashioned. Inside lay documents my father had insisted I keep separate from my married finances, certificates for investments he'd made on my behalf, the deed to Lake Haven, solely in my name, and an insurance policy worth significantly more than Nathan knew. I photographed everything, then carefully returned the documents to their hiding place. These weren't just financial instruments, they were my safety net, my insurance against the worst-case scenario that was looking increasingly likely. Back in Westlake, I scheduled another meeting with Grace, this time at her office rather than our usual restaurant. I want to establish an investment company, I told her without preamble. A separate legal entity from my personal finances or Nathan's business. Grace nodded slowly. For what purpose? Initially, to pursue the Harrington Building acquisition, eventually for other commercial properties. And Nathan's role in this venture? None, I said firmly. This is mine alone. Over the next 2 weeks, Coastal Investments took shape, named for the view from Lake Haven, a place that represented independence and solace to me. Grace connected me with investment partners who were intrigued by the opportunity and impressed by my analysis of the property's potential. My initial capital came from liquidating investments from my separate portfolio, assets Nathan had never concerned himself with. Simultaneously, I continued gathering information about Nathan's affair, not for divorce court dramatics, but to understand the full scope of his deception. The pieces came together during a charity event at the Westlake Art Museum. I was arranging centerpieces when I overheard Claudia Warren, Thomas's wife, speaking with another board member. "Nathan's little secretary is getting quite presumptuous," Claudia murmured, "calling the office with personal demands, expecting Thomas to cover for their working lunches. Oh, as if anyone believes they're discussing business." I froze, pretending to adjust a flower arrangement while straining to hear more. "How long has it been going on?" the other woman asked. "At least 6 months that I know of," Claudia replied. "Thomas says Nathan's besotted, even talking about opening a position for her at the new office once they secure the building." "Does Thalia know?" Claudia's voice dropped further. "Thomas says she's completely in the dark. Poor thing thinks she's living the perfect life while Nathan's planning his exit strategy." Exit strategy. The words echoed in my mind as I excused myself to the restroom, locking the stall door before allowing my hands to shake. Not just an affair, then. Something more calculated, more permanent. That night, I accessed Nathan's email while he showered. Something I'd never done before, a boundary I'd respected throughout our marriage. His password was still Ethan's birth date, followed by my initials, a small irony that made me sick to my stomach. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Emails arranging viewings of apartments downtown, discussions with his personal attorney about asset division strategies, and most damning, a message to Olivia about making arrangements once. The situation was resolved. I forwarded key emails to my secure account, then carefully marked everything as unread before closing his laptop. In our bedroom, I watched Nathan emerge from the bathroom, toweling his hair, smiling at me with the same expression I'd trusted for 15 years. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my stillness. "Perfect," I lied, matching his expertise in deception for the first time. "Just thinking about Ethan's science project tomorrow." Nathan climbed into bed beside me, kissed my cheek perfunctorily, and turned out his light. "Don't worry so much. He'll do fine." As Nathan fell asleep, I stared at the ceiling, mentally cataloging what I'd learned and what remained to be done. The betrayal hurt. Of course it did. But the careful calculation behind it, the elaborate plans he'd made while pretending everything was normal, that was what hardened my resolve. This wasn't a momentary lapse or a midlife crisis. This was methodical. And I would respond in kind. The next morning, I called Diana and arranged an emergency meeting during Ethan's soccer practice. "He's planning to leave," I told her, sliding my phone across her desk with the forwarded emails displayed. "And he's been preparing for months." Diana reviewed the messages, her expression darkening. "This changes our timeline. We need to move. Faster." "The Harrington acquisition?" She nodded. "Accelerated if possible. And we need to secure your ownership stake in Miller and Warren before he attempts to dilute it or claim it was transferred." For the next week, I lived a double life that rivaled Nathan's in its complexity. While maintaining our family routines, helping with homework, hosting a dinner party for Nathan's clients, attending my committee meetings, I was simultaneously finalizing the Harrington purchase, documenting financial discrepancies, and preparing for a future I'd never imagined. The most difficult aspect was Ethan. At 10, he was perceptive enough to notice tension, but too young to understand its source. One evening, as I tucked him into bed, he asked a question that broke my carefully maintained composure. "Mom, are you and Dad okay? You guys don't laugh together anymore." I sat on the edge of his bed, stroking his hair, so like Nathan's in color and texture. "Grown-ups sometimes go through complicated times," I said carefully. "But I promise you're always my priority, no matter what happens." His forehead wrinkled. "Is Dad going to go away like Jake's dad did?" Jake was his classmate, whose parents had divorced messily the previous year. "I don't know what's going to happen," I answered honestly. "But I can promise you that both Dad and I love you more than anything, and that won't ever change." He seemed satisfied with this answer, but as I closed his door, I felt a surge of anger toward Nathan. His selfish choices weren't just betraying me. They were threatening the security of our son's world. And for what? A younger woman. A fresh start, unburdened by the responsibilities he'd willingly taken on. The final piece of my preparation came together unexpectedly through Thomas Warren. He called me directly one afternoon, something that had never happened before. His voice, tense. "Thalia, I need to speak with you, privately. Can you meet me?" We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near his daughter's dance studio, a location Nathan would never frequent. Thomas looked haggard, his usual polished appearance diminished by dark circles under his eyes and a rumpled suit. He wasted no time on pleasantries. "Nathan's making decisions that could sink the company," he said, voice low despite the empty tables surrounding us. "Taking on excessive debt, pursuing projects without proper due diligence, missing meetings with key investors." I sipped my tea, letting him continue. "Last week, he nearly lost the Riverside project by showing up unprepared to the council meeting. I had to step in, but the damage was done. 2 investors have already pulled out." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, though I already suspected. Thomas ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Because you still own 30% of the company. I checked the original documents. Your shares were never formally transferred despite what Nathan's been claiming." I kept my expression neutral. And I think you deserve to know that your investment is at risk. Nathan's distracted, making poor decisions. The company we built is suffering. I studied him, weighing my options. "What about the Harrington Building? I understood that was a priority acquisition." Thomas grimaced. "Nathan's bungled that too. Dragged his feet on securing financing, then submitted a lowball offer conditional on terms no seller would accept. Now I'm hearing rumors another buyer's entered the picture." "That would be unfortunate," I said mildly, "especially since you're currently leasing space there." "Exactly." Thomas leaned forward. "If we lose that location, with everything else that's happening." "Thalia, I'm concerned about the company's survival." I considered my next words carefully. "What would you like me to do with this information, Thomas?" He hesitated. "Talk to Nathan. As his wife, maybe he'll listen. To you. Make him see reason before it's too late." I almost laughed at the irony. Thomas assuming my wifely influence might save the company, completely unaware that Nathan was planning to discard both his marriage and my ownership stake. "I appreciate your concern," I said, gathering my purse. "I'll give it some thought." As I stood to leave, Thomas caught my wrist. "There's something else you should know." He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "It's about Olivia Carter." I kept my face expressionless. "Nathan's secretary." "Yes, she's—" He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. "Thalia, she's pregnant. And Nathan's the father." I allowed a single blink to acknowledge the information. Confirmation of what I'd already suspected from the sonogram in Nathan's desk. "I see." Thomas looked confused by my calm reaction. "You knew?" "I suspected," I said quietly. "How far along is she?" "About 4 months." Thomas looked miserable now. "I shouldn't be the one telling you this, but with everything that's happening with the company, I thought you deserved to know the full picture." 4 months. Which meant Nathan had known about the pregnancy while celebrating our anniversary, while planning Ethan's birthday party, while discussing a family vacation for next summer. The calculated deception was breathtaking. "Thank you for your honesty," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "It clarifies several things." That evening, I finalized the last details of the Harrington acquisition with Grace. "We've secured the financing and the initial investors are committed," she confirmed. "The owner has accepted our offer over Miller & Warren's. We can close within 10 days. "Perfect," I said, signing the preliminary documents. And the ownership? Structure is, as we discussed? Grace nodded. Coastal Investments will be the official purchaser, with you as the majority stakeholder through your separate assets. Your name appears nowhere in the public documentation. I looked up from the papers. And you're certain Nathan can't trace this back to me? Not unless someone involved deliberately reveals your connection, Grace assured me. The ownership is structured through multiple layers, all perfectly legal but not easily traceable. I signed the final page, feeling a strange sense of calm. Then we're ready. The night before the closing, I sat alone on our back patio, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Tomorrow, I would take a definitive step that would change the course of my marriage and future. There would be no going back. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Working late again. Don't wait up. Another lie in our growing collection. I'd tracked his phone location earlier. He was at Olivia's apartment across town. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of grief for what we'd lost. Or perhaps what we'd never truly had. The partnership I'd believed in, the family we'd built, the future we'd planned. All of it constructed on a foundation far more fragile than I'd realized. But grief wouldn't serve me now. What I needed was clarity and purpose. I texted back a simple okay and went inside to prepare Ethan's lunch for tomorrow, write a note for his field trip permission slip, and review the final Coastal Investments documents once more. The woman Nathan thought he knew, the accommodating wife, the background supporter of his ambitions, the comfortable homemaker, was a role I'd played while losing sight of my own capabilities. But she wasn't the complete truth of who I was. Tomorrow, Nathan would begin to understand the difference, and I would reclaim the power I'd forgotten I possessed. Morning arrived with a sense of destiny. I dressed with particular care, not in my usual casual elegance, but in a sharply tailored suit I'd purchased for this specific occasion. I prepared Ethan's breakfast, quizzed him on spelling words, and kissed him goodbye at the school gate, as I did every day. "I love you, Mom," he called, waving from the entrance. "Love you more," I replied, our daily ritual unchanged despite everything shifting beneath the surface. From the school, I drove directly to the bank where Grace was waiting with the final paperwork for the Harrington Building acquisition. The transaction itself was almost anticlimactic. Signatures on documents, electronic transfers confirmed, handshakes with investors I'd persuaded to join this venture. "Congratulations, Ms. Everett," the bank officer said, using my maiden name, another detail I'd carefully arranged. "You're now the primary owner of one of Westlake's premier commercial properties." I accepted the congratulations with a polite smile, but my mind was already racing ahead to what would come next. I had the leverage I needed. Now it was time to use it. As I drove to the Harrington Building to meet with the property management company, I felt a strange lightness. For months, I'd been carrying the weight of Nathan's betrayal, the uncertainty of my future, and the careful orchestration of my response. Now, action had replaced preparation. Whatever happened next, I was ready. And then I overheard them, Nathan, and Olivia in his office, dismissing me as just a housewife, while I stood silently in the doorway, the building's ownership documents in my hand. The final confirmation I needed. I wasn't fighting to save my marriage. I was fighting for myself, for Ethan, and for the future Nathan had planned to take from us. As I left the building, heading toward Diana's office with renewed determination, my phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "Congratulations on your new acquisition. What's next?" I smiled, thinking of the confrontation to come. What's next was holding Nathan accountable, not just for his infidelity, but for his financial deceptions, his dismissal of my capabilities, and his willingness to discard 15 years of partnership without a backward glance. What's next was justice, and I had prepared meticulously to ensure it would be served. "You did what?" Nathan's voice echoed through the hotel suite, bouncing off the cream-colored walls as he paced frantically. His perfectly pressed shirt had come untucked, his designer tie loosened in a rare display of dishevelment. I remained seated at the desk, hands folded calmly over the documents that had shattered his composure. I purchased the Harrington Building through my investment company, Coastal Investments. "This isn't possible," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "You don't have that kind of capital. You couldn't have arranged this without me knowing." "Evidently I could and I did," I replied, keeping my voice level. "The transaction closed this morning. The deed has been transferred. The notification to tenants, including Miller and Warren Development, went out shortly after." Nathan stopped his pacing to stare at me, as if seeing me for the first time. The confusion in his eyes was gradually being replaced by something else, a dawning recognition mixed with apprehension. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "About Olivia, the pregnancy, or your plans to leave me once you'd secured your financial position?" I met his gaze steadily. "I've had my suspicions for months, but I've known with certainty for about 12 weeks. He sank into the chair opposite me, his usual commanding presence diminished. 12 weeks, he repeated. "All this time? You've been... what? Planning this ambush?" "I prefer to think of it as due diligence," I corrected him. "You taught me the importance of that, remember? Always understand the leverage points in any negotiation. That was your advice when we were first married." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "This isn't a business deal, Thalia. This is our marriage." "Was our marriage," I corrected. "Past tense. As of this morning, my attorney has prepared divorce filings citing adultery and financial misconduct. They'll be submitted to the court tomorrow, unless we reach an alternative arrangement today." Nathan's expression hardened. "So that's what this is, extortion? Buy my way out of a public scandal?" I laughed, genuinely amused by his indignation. "Nathan, you emptied our joint investment account last month. You've been funneling money to a separate account for almost a year. You forged my signature on the Aspen property documents, and you've been preparing to leave me for your pregnant secretary while telling me we were planning next summer's family vacation." I leaned forward. "Extortion would be the least of your concerns if I decided to play by your rules." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Things with Olivia, they just happened. I never meant—" "Let me stop you there," I interrupted, raising my hand. "I'm not interested in the romantic narrative you've constructed to justify your actions. The only thing that matters now is how we proceed." Nathan took a deep breath, visibly trying to regain his composure, to reclaim the control he was accustomed to wielding in every situation. "Fine. What do you want?" I slid a folder across the desk. "My terms are outlined here. In summary, I retain full ownership of our primary residence and the Lake Haven property. I receive 50% of all liquid assets currently held in your name or in company accounts that I can prove were funded with marital assets. My 30% ownership stake in Miller and Warren remains intact." "That's absurd," Nathan exploded, not even opening the folder. "The company would never survive with you as an owner after a divorce. Our investors would flee, our clients would lose confidence." "Then perhaps you should have considered that before jeopardizing everything we built together," I said calmly. "But if the company's welfare concerns you so deeply, there's an alternative arrangement on page 3. Reluctantly, Nathan opened the folder and flipped to the indicated page. His eyes widened as he read. "You can't be serious." "I'm perfectly serious," I assured him. "You can buy out my ownership stake in Miller and Warren for its current market value plus 20%, a reasonable premium given the circumstances. Additionally, you will relinquish any claim to the Harrington Building and sign a 10-year lease agreement at market rates, with annual increases capped at 3%. He looked up, incredulous. "You want me to pay you millions for shares that should already be mine, then become your tenant?" "Those are indeed the terms." Nathan threw the folder back onto the desk. This is vindictive, punitive. No court would— My lawyer disagrees, I interrupted smoothly. As does the forensic accountant who's been documenting your financial maneuvers for the past 3 months. Would you like to see their preliminary reports? They make for fascinating reading. I watched as Nathan processed this, the realization that while he'd been constructing his exit strategy, I'd been building my own case. The balance of power between us was shifting visibly, like a scale tipping in real time. You've turned into someone I don't recognize, he said finally, his voice low. No, Nathan. I've simply stopped being the person you assumed I was. I stood, gathering my belongings. You have 24 hours to review the terms with your attorney. After that, we proceed with litigation. I moved toward the door, but Nathan's voice stopped me. The business won't survive a protracted legal battle, he said, an edge of desperation entering his tone. Everything I've built, everything we've built, it would all collapse. I turned back to face him. Then make the right decision. For once, consider the consequences of your actions before it's too late. His eyes narrowed. And what about Ethan? Have you considered what this will do to him? Finding out about the divorce, about Olivia, about the baby? Don't you dare use our son as leverage, I cut in, my calm facade cracking slightly. Ethan is the one person in this situation who deserves protection. I've already consulted a family therapist about the best way to help him through this transition. Another detail you might have attended to if you weren't so focused on your own desires. Nathan looked genuinely surprised. You've talked to a therapist about divorce? That doesn't sound like you. Perhaps you never really knew me at all, I replied softly. 24 hours, Nathan. Make them count. With that, I walked out of the hotel room, closing the door firmly behind me. In the elevator, I exhaled slowly, releasing the tension I'd been carefully controlling throughout our confrontation. My hands trembled slightly, the only outward sign of the emotional storm swirling beneath my composed exterior. In the lobby, I spotted Diana waiting discreetly in a corner seating area. She rose as I approached, her experienced eyes assessing my state. How did it go? She asked, guiding me toward the hotel's side exit to avoid any potential encounters with Nathan. Exactly as expected, I replied. Initial shock, then anger, followed by attempts to manipulate and control the narrative. Diana nodded as we reached her car. Did he review the terms? Briefly. He'll need time to process everything. I gave him 24 hours. And you? She asked, starting the engine. How are you holding up? I gazed out the window at the Westlake skyline, the Harrington Building visible among the cluster of downtown structures. I'm fine. It needed to be done. Diana gave me a knowing look but didn't press further. I've cleared my afternoon schedule. We should prepare for his counteroffer. He won't accept our terms without a fight. I know, I said, but he has less leverage than he thinks. At Diana's office, we spent the next 3 hours anticipating Nathan's potential responses and preparing counter-strategies. Despite my exhaustion, I found clarity in the tactical discussion. This was familiar territory from my business days, the careful chess game of negotiation and position. He'll try to minimize the affair, Diana predicted, making notes. Claim it was a momentary lapse, that Olivia pursued him, that he was under stress from business pressures. I nodded. And when that fails, he'll pivot to financial arguments, claiming, I'm being unreasonable, that the company's valuation is inflated, that my contribution to his success was minimal. Exactly, Diana agreed. Men like Nathan rarely accept responsibility. They look for external factors to blame. By late afternoon, we had anticipated every likely scenario and prepared our responses. I felt mentally drained but oddly empowered. For the first time since discovering Nathan's betrayal, I was dictating the terms rather than reacting to his choices. What about Ethan? Diana asked as we wrapped up. When will you tell him about the separation? I sighed, the weight of motherhood pressing heavily on my shoulders. Not until things are settled with Nathan. I want to present a united front if possible, spare him the ugliest details. And if Nathan doesn't cooperate with that approach? My expression hardened. Then he'll confirm everything I now believe about his character, and I'll protect Ethan. On my own. Diana studied me, a hint of admiration in her gaze. You know, most clients come to me broken, seeking revenge or trying to salvage what's left of their self-worth. You're different, methodical, clear-headed. I don't have the luxury of falling apart, I said simply, not with Ethan depending on me. As I left Diana's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Management company reports Miller & Warren has requested an emergency meeting about their lease. Shall I attend on your behalf? I smiled slightly. Nathan was already making moves, trying to circumvent me by dealing directly with the property managers. No need, I replied. They'll need to speak with the owner directly. I'll handle it tomorrow. That evening, I picked up Ethan from his after-school program, maintaining our normal routine despite the seismic shifts occurring in my life. He chatted about his science project, a basketball game at recess, and his upcoming field trip. I listened attentively, cherishing these mundane details of his world, a world I was fighting to keep stable despite its crumbling foundation. Is Dad coming home for dinner? Ethan asked as we pulled into our driveway. I hesitated, then decided on partial honesty. Not tonight, sweetheart. He's dealing with some important business matters. Ethan nodded, accepting this explanation without question. He was accustomed to Nathan's frequent absences for work. We prepared dinner together, played a board game, and followed our usual bedtime routine. Only after he was asleep did I allow myself a moment of grief, sitting alone in the kitchen with a glass of wine, surrounded by the trappings of a family life that had been partially illusory all along. My phone buzzed again. Nathan. We need to talk. Things with Olivia aren't what you think? I stared at the message, noting the absence of any mention of our earlier conversation or the terms I'd presented. Typical Nathan, trying to control the narrative, redirect focus to what he considered the central issue. I didn't respond. At 11:37 p.m., another text arrived. I'm meeting with my lawyer first thing tomorrow. This doesn't have to get ugly, Thalia. The implied threat was clear. Cooperate, on his terms, or face a legal battle. I forwarded both messages to Diana without comment and went to bed, though sleep proved elusive. Morning brought a flurry of activity. After dropping Ethan at school, I received a call from the Harrington Building's property manager. Ms. Everett, I understand you're the new owner, he began, sounding slightly flustered. I've received multiple calls from Miller & Warren Development, specifically from Mr. Miller, requesting an urgent meeting about their lease terms. Yes, I was expecting this, I replied calmly. Please direct all such inquiries to me personally. Going forward, I'll be at the building at noon to discuss the situation. Next came a call from Thomas Warren, his voice tense with controlled panic. Thalia, what's happening? Nathan says you've purchased the Harrington Building through some shell company. Is that true? It's not a shell company, Thomas. It's a legitimate investment firm I established. And yes, Coastal Investments now owns the building. A moment of stunned silence. But why? Why wouldn't you tell me about this? After I came to you with my concerns about the company? Because Nathan and I are separating, I said simply. And his plans for the company didn't align with protecting my interests. Separating? Thomas sounded genuinely shocked. Since when? Nathan never said anything about... I'm sure there are many things Nathan hasn't shared with you, I interrupted gently. But rest assured, Miller & Warren's tenancy isn't in immediate jeopardy. I have no intention of disrupting business operations. Maliciously. No immediate jeopardy, Thomas repeated, picking up on the qualification. Which means which means we'll be renegotiating terms based on current market rates, with reasonable accommodations for a long-standing tenant. Nothing more, nothing less. After ending the call with a still bewildered Thomas, I prepared for what would likely be my most challenging encounter of the day. I dressed with careful consideration, a tailored navy suit that projected authority without ostentation, minimal jewelry except for my grandmother's pearls, and low heels that would allow me to navigate the building's marble lobby with confidence. Diana met me outside the Harrington Building at 11:45 a.m., her briefcase containing all the documentation we might need for this impromptu negotiation. "Nathan's attorney called this morning," she informed me as we rode the elevator to the management offices on the 8th floor. "They're requesting a formal mediation session before we file any court documents." I nodded, unsurprised. He's buying time. "And trying to keep this out of public record for as long as possible," Diana agreed. I told them we'd consider mediation after reviewing their counter-proposal. The property management suite was tastefully appointed, with sweeping views of Westlake Bay. The manager, Kenneth Powell, greeted us with professional courtesy that couldn't quite mask his discomfort at being caught between powerful opposing interests. "Ms. Everett, Ms. Rodriguez, thank you for coming on such short notice," he began, ushering us into a conference room. Mr. Miller was quite insistent about meeting today, though I explained the building's ownership transition was still being processed in our systems. "That's fine, Kenneth," I assured him. "Is Mr. Miller already here?" As if on cue, the door opened, and Nathan strode in, followed by a distinguished older man I recognized as Gerald Hoffman, one of Westlake's most prominent attorneys. Nathan faltered slightly upon seeing me already seated at the table, clearly having expected to arrive first and establish the psychological high ground. "Thalia," he said, quickly recovering his composure. "I didn't realize you'd be here personally." "It seemed appropriate, given that we're discussing my building," I replied pleasantly. "You remember Diana Rodriguez, my attorney?" Nathan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he and Gerald took seats across from us. Kenneth Powell positioned himself at the head of the table, visibly uncomfortable with the tension crackling through the room. "Perhaps I should clarify my role here," Kenneth began hesitantly. "As property manager, I can facilitate discussions about tenancy and lease terms, but any substantive negotiations would need—" "Kenneth," I interrupted gently, "why don't you give us the room for a few minutes? This is primarily a private matter between Mr. Miller and myself. We'll call you when we're ready to discuss specific property management concerns." Looking relieved, Kenneth nodded and quickly exited, closing the door behind him. Nathan leaned forward immediately. "This is absurd, Thalia. You know as well as I do that Miller and Warren need stability to maintain investor confidence. Playing games with our office lease is just—" "I'm not playing games," I cut in. "I'm making sound business decisions regarding a valuable property I now own, which is exactly what you would do in my position." Gerald Hoffman cleared his throat. "Ms. Everett, while I understand emotions may be running high given the personal circumstances, we hope to find a reasonable accommodation that serves everyone's interests." Diana smiled thinly. "And what exactly do you consider reasonable, Mr. Hoffman?" Gerald opened a folder. "We propose maintaining Miller and Warren's current lease terms for the duration of the original agreement, 3 more years, with an option to purchase the building at a fair market value to be determined by independent appraisal." I couldn't help but laugh. "So essentially, you want everything to continue exactly as Nathan planned before I purchase the building." "We're simply asking for business continuity during a transitional period," Gerald replied smoothly. "After which, yes, Miller and Warren would exercise its natural interest in securing its headquarters location." "Natural interest," I repeated. Interesting choice of words. Almost as interesting as Nathan's choice to pursue an affair with his secretary while planning to divorce me without proper financial disclosure. Gerald's expression remained professionally neutral, but I noticed a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Apparently, Nathan hadn't shared all the relevant details with his attorney. Nathan shot me a warning look. This meeting is about business, not personal matters. On the contrary, I replied evenly. They're inextricably linked. Your personal decisions directly impacted our marital assets, including my investment in Miller & Warren. Your business decisions regarding company finances directly affected our family's financial security. You don't get to separate them now because it's convenient. Diana placed a document on the table. Our counter-proposal is straightforward. Miller & Warren can maintain its current office space with a new 5-year lease at market rates, which our analysis indicates are approximately 27% higher than your current arrangement. Alternatively, you can relocate when your current lease expires in 90 days. Gerald's eyebrows rose. 90 days? The original lease doesn't expire for 3 years. The original lease included a change of ownership clause allowing for renegotiation, Diana explained, tapping the relevant section of the document. Standard practice in commercial real estate. Surely Mr. Miller was aware of this provision when he signed it. Nathan's face darkened. This is clearly intended to pressure the company financially during divorce proceedings. It's transparent and won't look good to a judge. I met his gaze steadily. And how do you think it will look when a judge reviews the financial records? Showing how you've been preparing to divest me of my rightful assets while starting a new family with an employee? Let's not pretend either of us is approaching this with entirely clean hands, Nathan. A heavy silence fell over the conference room. For the first time, I saw genuine worry in Nathan's expression. The realization that I wasn't bluffing, that I had both the knowledge and the means to challenge him effectively. Gerald leaned over to whisper something to Nathan, who nodded reluctantly after a moment of consideration. Perhaps we should adjourn this discussion and continue it as part of broader settlement negotiations, Gerald suggested, gathering his papers. This is clearly just one aspect of a more comprehensive conversation that needs to happen. Diana glanced at me, and I gave a slight nod. We're amenable to that approach, provided Mr. Miller understands that the 90-day timeline remains in effect unless we reach an agreement specifically addressing it. Nathan stood abruptly. This isn't over, Thalia. No, I agreed calmly. It's just beginning. After Nathan and Gerald departed, Diana turned to me with raised eyebrows. That went better than expected. He's rattled. He's not used to losing control, I observed, especially not to someone he's underestimated. We called Kenneth back into the conference room to discuss practical matters related to the building management. Throughout our meeting, I could feel my phone vibrating repeatedly in my purse. Likely Nathan, attempting to continue our confrontation in a forum where he felt more comfortable. By late afternoon, as I left the Harrington Building, the reality of what I'd done was finally sinking in. I had directly challenged Nathan, not just personally, but professionally. I had leveraged my knowledge and resources to secure a position of strength. And in doing so, I had irrevocably altered the dynamic between us. The power had shifted. We both knew it. My phone rang as I reached my car. Not Nathan this time, but Olivia Carter. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer, then decided it was better to know what Nathan's next move might be. Hello, Olivia, I answered, my voice neutral. A brief hesitation. Mrs. Miller, Thalia, She sounded flustered, uncertain. What can I help you with? I prompted when she didn't continue. Nathan, Mr. Miller, he's not himself. After your meeting today, he came back to the office and started throwing things. He fired an associate for no reason. He's saying you're trying to destroy him. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. He told me not to call you, but I'm scared. I've never seen him like this. I processed this information carefully. And why are you telling me this, Olivia? Another pause. Because I think I've made a terrible mistake. Nathan promised me so many things. A future, security for the baby, a partnership in life. But seeing him today, how he acted when things didn't go his way, I don't recognize him. The irony wasn't lost. On me, Olivia experiencing the same disillusionment I had, only compressed into a single day rather than spread across months of discovery. Nathan is very good at presenting himself as whatever he thinks you want to see, I said finally. That's a skill he's perfected over many years. What should I do? She asked, sounding much younger than her 26 years. That's not for me to say, I replied gently but firmly. You made your choices, Olivia, just as Nathan made his, just as I'm making mine now. But the baby will always be an innocent party in this situation, I interrupted. Whatever happens between you and Nathan, or between Nathan and me, that child deserves protection and care. On that point, we can agree. After ending the call, I sat in my car for several minutes, processing everything that had happened. I felt no triumph, no vindictive satisfaction from Nathan's apparent meltdown or Olivia's distress, only a profound sadness for the wreckage of what had once been my life, mixed with the emerging sense of possibility about what might come next. By the time I picked up Ethan from school, I had composed myself enough to maintain our normal interactions. We discussed his day, made plans for his weekend science project, and shared a pizza for dinner. Only when he went upstairs to start his homework did I allow myself to check the messages that had accumulated throughout the afternoon. 7 missed calls from Nathan, 3 voicemails, multiple texts ranging from apologetic, "We need to talk," rationally about this, to accusatory, "You're making a terrible mistake," to threatening, "My lawyers will tear apart your claims to company ownership." I forwarded everything to Diana without listening to the voicemails or responding to the texts. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped onto the back patio, gazing up at the emerging stars. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Thomas. Warren reached out to me directly. Says Nathan is unraveling and investors are getting nervous. Wants to meet with you privately tomorrow. Recommendation? I considered this unexpected development. Thomas had been Nathan's loyal partner for over a decade. His reaching out separately suggested fractures within the company that could either complicate my position or provide additional leverage. Tell him I'll meet him at Blue Water Cafe at 10 a.m., I replied. But make it clear this doesn't constitute negotiation without legal counsel present. Grace's response came quickly. Understood. By the way, the building's quarterly financial reports show higher than projected income. You made an excellent investment, regardless of the circumstances. I smiled slightly. In all the emotional turmoil of confronting Nathan, I'd almost forgotten the purely financial aspect of my decision to purchase the Harrington Building. It wasn't just leverage in my personal battle. It was a sound business move that would provide long-term financial security for Ethan and me, regardless of how the divorce proceedings unfolded. That night, as I prepared for bed, I heard my phone ring one final time. Nathan again. This time I answered. What is it, Nathan? It's late. His voice was subdued, lacking the commanding presence he typically projected. We need to talk about this rationally, Thalia, not through lawyers or in ambush meetings. Just you and me, like we used to solve problems together. We're beyond that point, I said quietly. You made sure of that when you decided our marriage was disposable. It wasn't like that, he insisted. Things with Olivia, they just happened. I got caught up in something I didn't expect. But that doesn't erase 15 years together, building a life, raising Ethan. No, it doesn't erase those years, I agreed. But it fundamentally changes what comes next. A long silence. Then, Thomas says you've agreed to meet with him tomorrow. Yes. He thinks you're being reasonable about the building, that we can work something out. Nathan's tone was careful, probing. Is that true? Are you open to finding a solution that doesn't destroy everything I've built? I chose my words deliberately. I'm open to arrangements that fairly recognize my contributions and protect my future interests. Nothing more, nothing less. And what about us? Is there any chance? He trailed off, leaving the question hanging. I closed my eyes, momentarily overwhelmed by the audacity of his implied suggestion. After everything, the affair, the pregnancy, the financial deceptions, the dismissive comments, he still believed reconciliation might be an option if it served his interests. There is no us anymore, Nathan, I said with finality. Only co-parents to Ethan and business counterparts with overlapping interests to negotiate. His breath caught audibly. You've changed, Thalia. No, I corrected him. I've remembered who I was before I started diminishing myself to accommodate your ego. Good night, Nathan. I ended the call and turned off my phone, unwilling to allow any further interruptions to my peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Meeting with Thomas, preparing to tell Ethan about the changes coming to our family, continuing negotiations through Diana. But tonight, I had taken definitive control of my narrative. The woman Nathan had dismissed as just a housewife had become his most formidable adversary. And we both knew it was just the beginning. The Blue Water Cafe hummed with mid-morning activity, business meetings, friends catching up, solitary workers hunched over laptops. I arrived 15 minutes early for my meeting with Thomas, selecting a corner table that offered both privacy and a clear view of the entrance. The familiar environment felt surreal now, as if I were visiting a location from someone else's life, rather than a place I'd frequented for years. I ordered a latte and reviewed my notes from the previous day's confrontation with Nathan. Diana had advised me to maintain a consistent position. I was open to reasonable accommodation regarding Miller and Warren's tenancy in the Harrington Building, but only in the context of a fair divorce settlement that recognized my ownership stake in the company and protected my financial interests. At precisely 10 a.m., Thomas Warren entered the cafe, his searching gaze finding me immediately. He looked haggard, tie slightly askew, strain evident around his eyes. As he approached my table, I noticed his usual confident stride had diminished to something more tentative. Thalia, he greeted me with a stiff nod. Thank you for meeting me. I gestured to the chair across from mine. Of course, Thomas. An awkward silence settled between us as he ordered coffee. We had known each other for over a decade, attending countless dinners, holiday gatherings, and company events together. Yet today, we were essentially strangers negotiating across a battlefield neither of us had anticipated. I'll be direct, Thomas said finally, setting down his cup. The company is in trouble. Nathan's distracted, erratic. Investors are getting nervous, and our Riverside project deadline is approaching with significant deliverables still incomplete. I sipped my latte, allowing him to continue. 2 major clients have already called, asking about rumors of instability in our leadership, he went on. The Harrington Building situation has created exactly the uncertainty we couldn't afford right now. And what do you expect me to do about that, Thomas? I asked evenly. He leaned forward. Work with us, not against us. Give Miller and Warren reasonable terms for the building lease, terms that don't strangle our cash flow at a critical moment. In return, I'll personally ensure that your interests in the company are protected during whatever personal matters you and Nathan need to resolve. I studied him carefully. That's a generous offer, but it assumes you have the authority to make such promises. Nathan is still the majority shareholder. Thomas's expression tightened. For now, but our partnership agreement includes provisions for emergency leadership transitions if a principal becomes unable to fulfill their duties. The implication was clear. Thomas was considering invoking clauses that would temporarily remove Nathan from control. It was a drastic step, One, that would permanently damage their relationship and potentially trigger legal battles of its own. "You're staging a coup," I observed quietly. "I'm preserving the company," Thomas corrected, though he didn't deny my characterization. "Nathan's personal choices have put everything at risk, not just his marriage, but the livelihoods of everyone who works for us, the investments of people who trusted us, the projects communities are counting on." I considered his position. Thomas had always been the stabilizing force at Miller and Warren, the meticulous planner who balanced Nathan's visionary but sometimes reckless approach. That he would consider such extreme measures spoke volumes about how severely Nathan's behavior was affecting the business. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. Thomas outlined his plan. He would invoke temporary emergency control provisions, citing Nathan's current mental state and conflicts of interest. During this period, he would negotiate fair terms for both the building lease and my ownership stake in the company. Once those matters were settled, Nathan could return to his leadership role with appropriate governance safeguards. "And what does Nathan think of this arrangement?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. Thomas grimaced. "He doesn't know yet. That's part of why I needed to speak with you first. Your support, or at least your neutrality, would make the transition more viable." I carefully considered all angles of this unexpected development. Thomas's proposal could potentially benefit me, providing a more rational negotiating partner than Nathan currently presented. However, it also risked complicating an already complex situation and might push Nathan to more desperate measures. "I'll need to consult with my attorney before committing to anything," I said finally. "But I appreciate your candor, Thomas. And I'm not opposed to arrangements that provide stability for the company during this transition." Relief flickered across his face. "That's all I'm asking. Time to stabilize things before irreparable damage is done." As we parted, Thomas hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, Thalia, I had no idea about Nathan and Olivia until recently. I wouldn't have kept something like that from you." I nodded, acknowledging his statement without confirming whether I believed it. "Take care, Thomas." I called Diana immediately after leaving the cafe, filling her in on Thomas's unexpected proposal. Her legal assessment was cautious, but intrigued. "It creates interesting leverage possibilities," she noted. "If the company leadership is divided, we might secure better terms than dealing with a united front. But it also introduces unpredictability. Nathan could respond erratically if he feels cornered from multiple directions." "My concern is Ethan," I admitted. "The more chaotic this becomes, the harder it will be to shield him from the fallout." "Then perhaps we should consider a more expedited approach," Diana suggested. "Rather than dragging this out through courts and corporate maneuvering, we propose a comprehensive settlement that gives everyone something they need, even if no one gets everything they want." By noon, Diana had outlined a potential global settlement framework that we could present to Nathan's attorneys, one that addressed the building lease, my company ownership, division of marital assets, and custody arrangements for Ethan in a single package. The approach would require Nathan to accept significant concessions, but would provide him with the business continuity he desperately needed. It's time to take this to Nathan directly, I decided. Not through lawyers or mediators. One final conversation between the two of us to see if we can end this cleanly. Diana looked concerned. Are you sure that's wise? Nathan's emotional state seems volatile right now. Precisely why it needs to be direct, I explained. Nathan responds to power and clarity. If I offer this framework through intermediaries, he'll see it as weakness or manipulation. Face to face, he'll understand I'm offering a path forward, not surrender. After some discussion, Diana reluctantly agreed, helping me refine our proposal into clear terms Nathan could evaluate immediately. I scheduled the meeting for that evening at a neutral location, a private dining room at Westlake Grill, where the staff's discretion was legendary among the city's elite. Before confronting Nathan again, however, I had a more important conversation. Pending. One with Ethan. I had promised myself I wouldn't burden him with adult problems before necessary, but events were accelerating. He needed to hear about the coming changes from me, not through school gossip or Nathan's potential outbursts. I picked Ethan up early from school, citing a doctor's appointment. Instead, I took him to his favorite place, the nature preserve, overlooking Westlake Bay, where hiking trails offered privacy, and the physical activity might help ease difficult emotions. As we walked along the pine-scented path, Ethan sensed something was different. "Are we celebrating something, Mom?" "It's not my birthday or anything." I smiled, reaching for his hand. "No celebration today. I just needed to talk with you about something important, and this seemed like a better place than sitting at home." His expression grew serious, suddenly looking older than his 10 years. "Is it about Dad?" "He hasn't been home much." We reached a viewpoint overlooking the water, a bench positioned perfectly to catch the afternoon light filtering through autumn leaves. I sat down, patting the space beside me. "Yes, it's about Dad and about our family," I began gently. "Dad and I have been having some adult problems." "Are you getting divorced?" he interrupted, his directness catching me by surprise. I looked into his eyes, so like Nathan's in shape and color, yet filled with a sensitivity his father often lacked. "Yes, sweetheart, we are." Ethan nodded slowly, processing this confirmation of what he'd apparently already suspected. "Is it because Dad has a girlfriend?" Jake at school said his mom saw Dad with a lady at a restaurant downtown. My heart clenched, both at the revelation that gossip had already reached Ethan's world and at his matter-of-fact delivery of this painful knowledge. I'd underestimated both the Westlake rumor mill and my son's awareness. "It's complicated," I answered carefully. "Dad and I have grown apart in ways that can't be fixed. His relationship with someone else is part of that, but not the whole story." "Is she going to be my stepmom?" Ethan asked, his voice smaller now. "I don't know what will happen in the future," I said honestly. "But what I do know for certain is that Dad and I both love you very much. That will never change, no matter what happens between us or who else might come into our lives." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, watching a sailboat glide across the distant bay. "Will I have to move? Change schools?" "No," I assured him firmly. "You'll stay in our house with me. Dad will have his own place, and you'll spend time with both of us. Your school, your friends, your activities, all of that stays the same." "Does Dad know we're having this talk?" The question revealed Ethan's perceptiveness about family dynamics, his awareness that adult decisions weren't always collaborative. "I told him I was planning to speak with you today," I said. "We both agree you deserve honesty, even when the truth is difficult." Ethan leaned against me, allowing me to put my arm around his shoulders. "I kind of knew already," he admitted. "You guys stopped laughing together, and Dad's phone always dings with messages he doesn't want me to see." My throat tightened with emotion. Partly sorrow that Ethan had been observing these signs of fracture, partly pride in his emotional intelligence. "I'm sorry you've been worried about this without feeling you could talk to us." He shrugged. "It's okay. Jake's parents got divorced last year, and he says it's not that bad now. He gets 2 birthdays and double Christmas presents. Despite everything." I laughed softly at his pragmatic perspective. "It might not be quite so gift-oriented for us, but yes, there can be good things about having 2 households that love you." We sat together watching the water, Ethan occasionally asking practical questions about logistics, where Dad would live, holiday arrangements, whether his bedroom would stay the same. I answered everything as honestly as I could without burdening him with adult complexities like affairs, prenatal appointments, or corporate power struggles. As we walked back to the car, Ethan suddenly stopped and looked up at me. "Mom, are you sad about the divorce?" The directness of his question deserved equal honesty. "Yes and no," I told him. "I'm sad about losing the family we plan to have forever. But I'm not sad about moving forward into whatever comes next. Sometimes endings are necessary for new beginnings." He considered this, then nodded with surprising maturity. "I think I get it. Like when my class play last year had a really bad rehearsal and Ms. Simmons said we needed to start over with a better plan." "Something like that," I agreed, marveling at his ability to find meaning through his own experience. That evening, after settling Ethan with his favorite babysitter and a pizza night planned, I dressed carefully for my meeting with Nathan. Not in business attire this time, but in a deep burgundy dress that projected confidence without corporate armor. This conversation needed to happen as equal partners dissolving a union, not as business adversaries. The private dining room at the Westlake Grill was discreetly tucked away from the main restaurant, with a separate entrance that allowed privacy. I arrived first, arranging the settlement documents on the table and ordering a bottle of Cabernet, Nathan's favorite wine, a small gesture acknowledging our shared history despite current circumstances. Nathan arrived 7 minutes late, his entrance lacking the commanding presence he typically cultivated. He appeared tired, his customary pristine appearance slightly disheveled. "Thank you for coming," I said as he took the seat across from me. He nodded, glancing at the wine. "Your choice?" I remembered it was your favorite. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Thoughtful, considering the circumstances. The server poured our wine and discreetly withdrew after confirming we didn't need menus. For a moment, we sat in loaded silence, 15 years of shared history hovering between us like an unseen presence. "I spoke with Ethan today," I said finally. "About the divorce." Nathan's expression tightened. "Without consulting me first? I told you yesterday I planned to do it. You didn't object." He sighed, the fight leaving him momentarily. How did he take it? Better than expected. He'd already pieced most of it together. I paused. "Including your relationship with Olivia. Apparently you were seen together around town." Nathan winced. "I didn't think—" "That's been the problem all along, hasn't it?" I interrupted gently. "You didn't think about the consequences. Not for me, not for Ethan, not even for the company you built." Rather than responding defensively as I expected, Nathan rubbed his temples wearily. "You're right. I've made a mess of everything." His admission caught me off guard. I had prepared for anger, negotiation tactics, even emotional manipulation. Not this uncharacteristic acceptance of responsibility. "I spoke with Thomas today," he continued, surprising me further. "He wants to invoke the emergency leadership protocols. Says I'm compromising company interests with personal volatility." "And what do you think about that?" I asked carefully. Nathan laughed without humor. "I think he might be right. I've lost focus, made impulsive decisions. The Riverside project is behind schedule. 2 investors have backed out of the Parkside development. The company's in trouble, and it's largely my fault." I studied him, trying to determine if this was genuine self-awareness or a tactical approach to gain sympathy. "Nathan, why are we here tonight? What do you want from this conversation?" He met my gaze directly. "Honestly? A way out of this chaos that doesn't destroy everything." I slid the settlement proposal across the table. "Then perhaps we should discuss this." Nathan reviewed the document slowly, his expression unreadable. The terms were straightforward but firm. I would retain full ownership of our primary residence and Lake Haven property. Nathan would buy out my stake in Miller & Warren at market value plus a reasonable premium. I would offer Miller & Warren a favorable 5-year lease for the Harrington Building, with gradual rate increases that wouldn't cripple their finances. We would share legal custody of Ethan, with me retaining primary physical custody, and Nathan having generous visitation rights. When he finished reading, Nathan sat back, swirling his wine thoughtfully. This is surprisingly reasonable. Did you expect vindictiveness? After everything? Yes, I did. He took a sip of wine. Why aren't you trying to destroy me, Thalia? God knows I've given you cause. I considered my answer carefully. Because destruction serves no one. Not me, not you. Certainly not Ethan. And because whatever happened between us, I don't want to be defined by bitterness. Even with Olivia? The pregnancy? That's between you and her, I said evenly. My concern is securing a stable future for Ethan and myself. What happens in your personal life going forward is your business, provided it doesn't harm our son. Nathan studied me with newfound respect. You're extraordinary, you know that? All these years, and I still underestimated you. Yes, I agreed simply. You did. He tapped the settlement document. I need to review this with my attorney, but conceptually, I think we can work with it, with one condition. Which is? The Harrington Building lease terms. They need to be guaranteed for the full 5 years, regardless of what happens with Miller and Warren's leadership. If Thomas pushes me out, the company's stability shouldn't suffer. I nodded. That's reasonable. I'll have Diana amend the language. We finished our wine in a silence that, while not comfortable, lacked the tension of our previous encounters. As we prepared to leave, Nathan hesitated. I told Olivia about our meeting tonight, he said. She's reevaluating things between us. I raised an eyebrow, not particularly surprised. Cold feet now that reality is setting in? Something like that. He looked away. The fantasy of running off together seems less appealing when faced with actual consequences. That tends to be how fantasies work, I observed, gathering my purse. Whatever happens between you two, remember that there's an innocent child involved now. That baby deserves better than parents who regret its existence. Nathan nodded soberly. I know. Whatever else I've screwed up, I won't fail at that. As we parted ways outside the restaurant, Nathan surprised me by asking, Do you think you'll ever forgive me, Thalia? I considered his question honestly. Forgiveness isn't something I can promise right now, but I can commit to moving forward without letting anger dictate my choices. That's the best I can offer. He accepted this with a nod, then added, For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for the affair or the pregnancy, but for taking you for granted, for forgetting who you really are. Thank you for saying that, I replied. Good night, Nathan. I drove home feeling oddly lighter, as if the weight of uncertainty had been partially lifted. The battle wasn't over. Legal documents would need to be finalized, financial transfers arranged, logistics of separate lives established, but the worst of the emotional storm seemed to have passed. The following morning brought unexpected news, Diana called before I'd finished my first cup of coffee. Olivia Carter has retained counsel, she reported, a note of surprise in her voice. She's filing for sole custody of her unborn child and seeking substantial support from Nathan. I set down my coffee cup. That was fast. Last I heard, she was reevaluating their relationship. Apparently, that reevaluation concluded with her deciding to secure her position legally rather than emotionally, Diana explained. Her attorney contacted me this morning, apparently aware of our settlement discussions. They want to ensure any financial arrangements between you and Nathan don't impact his ability to provide for the child. Interesting timing, I mused. Did Nathan know this was coming? According to his attorney, he was blindsided. They're scrambling to respond appropriately without jeopardizing our settlement framework. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathan's, carefully constructed escape plan was now collapsing from all sides. The mistress he'd chosen over his family was positioning herself as an adversary rather than a partner. The company he'd built was considering removing him from leadership. The wife he'd dismissed as just a housewife had outmaneuvered him financially. "How does this affect our proceedings?" I asked. "It doesn't directly impact the divorce terms," Diana assured me. "But it does complicate Nathan's financial outlook. The support obligations for Olivia's child will be substantial given his income level." After ending the call, I sat for a long moment contemplating these developments. I felt no satisfaction in Nathan's mounting problems, only a weary recognition that actions inevitably have consequences, often beyond what we anticipate. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Meeting with property management went well. Building operations transitioning smoothly. Quarterly revenue projections looking strong. A reminder that while personal dramas unfolded, business continued. The Harrington Building, my building, represented more than leverage in divorce negotiations. It was the foundation of my financial independence going forward, a concrete symbol of reclaiming my professional identity. Later that morning, Thomas called with news of his own. "Nathan's agreed to a voluntary leadership sabbatical," he reported, sounding both relieved and concerned. 3 months minimum, with interim authority passing to me as managing partner. "That's surprising," I admitted. "I wouldn't have expected him to step aside voluntarily." "It wasn't entirely voluntary," Thomas clarified. "The board made it clear they would support more drastic measures if he refused. And with Olivia's legal actions creating additional complications, he's cutting his losses," I concluded, trying to preserve what influence he can by appearing cooperative. "Essentially," Thomas agreed. "The good news is this should stabilize things for the company while your personal matters are resolved. I've already told our team I support the lease terms you proposed for the Harrington Building." After hanging up, I reviewed my calendar for the day. A meeting with Ethan's school counselor to discuss supporting him through the divorce, lunch with Grace to review my investment portfolio, an appointment with Diana to finalize settlement documents. The rhythm of purposeful activity was comforting after months of uncertainty and preparation. Mid-afternoon, a call came from an unexpected source. Claudia Warren, Thomas's wife and longtime friend of Nathan's family. "Thalia, darling, can we meet for tea?" Her tone was carefully casual, but the request itself was unusual. Claudia and I had maintained cordial relations over the years, but had never been close confidants. "Is everything all right, Claudia?" I asked. "Oh, perfectly fine," she assured me with practiced brightness. "Just thought we should catch up given everything that's happening. The Westlake Women's Association is absolutely buzzing with rumors, and I'd rather hear the truth directly." Ah, so that was it, reconnaissance. Claudia wanted inside information about the divorce, about Nathan and Olivia, about my unexpected emergence as a business force. Whether for personal curiosity or social currency, she was seeking details beyond what Thomas might have shared. "Tea sounds lovely," I agreed, deciding it was better to manage the narrative directly than allow speculation to flourish unchecked. "Shall we say tomorrow at the Grand Hotel Lounge?" Claudia readily agreed, and I made a mental note to prepare carefully for this conversation. The divorce wasn't finalized yet, and managing public perception could impact everything from Ethan's social comfort to business relationships moving forward. That evening, as I helped Ethan with a science project, Nathan texted, "Settlement terms accepted in principle. My lawyer will contact Diana with minor amendments tomorrow. Thank you for being reasonable about this." I showed the message to Diana when she called to check in. "Progress," she noted approvingly. "Though I'll reserve judgment until we see these minor amendments." "What's your assessment of his sudden cooperation?" I asked. "Is he genuinely accepting reality, or is this a tactical retreat?" "With men like Nathan, it's usually both," Diana observed. "He's practical enough to recognize when a position is untenable, but strategic enough to preserve resources for future battles. I'd expect him to comply with the letter of our agreement while looking for advantages around the margins." Her caution was well-founded. The following morning, Nathan's attorney sent over their proposed revisions, mostly reasonable clarifications, with one significant change. Nathan wanted a right of first refusal if I ever decided to sell the Harrington Building. Classic Nathan, I told Diana. He's already planning how to reclaim what he's losing. Do you want to reject it? She asked. I considered the request thoughtfully. No, let him have it. The right of first refusal doesn't obligate me to sell, only to offer him the opportunity to match any legitimate offer. Given his current financial constraints, it's unlikely he could exercise the option anyway. A symbolic victory for his ego, Diana agreed, might help smooth the final negotiations. By week's end, the settlement agreement was finalized and signed. The divorce filing would proceed as an uncontested matter, sparing both of us the public spectacle of litigation. Miller & Warren would retain its offices under the new lease terms, with Thomas at the helm during Nathan's sabbatical. My financial future and Ethan's stability were secured. The promised meeting with Claudia proved illuminating in unexpected ways. Rather than probing for gossip as I'd anticipated, she revealed her own marital discontent. Thomas hasn't been the same since taking over for Nathan, she confided over Earl Grey tea. He's obsessed with saving the company, works until midnight, barely notices the children or me. Leadership transitions are always challenging, I offered neutrally. Claudia leaned forward, lowering her voice despite the private alcove we occupied. The truth is, Thalia, I've always envied how you managed your life with Nathan. The perfect balance of supportive wife and independent woman. I thought you had it all figured out. I nearly choked on my tea at the irony. Appearances can be deceiving, Claudia. Clearly, she agreed with a meaningful look. But the way you've handled this situation, no public scenes, no social media meltdowns, just quiet dignity and apparently shrewd business moves, it's admirable. Her words reminded me that our private dramas often look entirely different from the outside. While I'd been navigating betrayal and calculating financial protections, others had seen a poised woman maintaining composure through adversity. Life rarely follows the script we imagine, I told her. The only choice is how we respond to the unexpected revisions. News of Olivia's condition continued to ripple through our social circles, though I maintained a dignified silence on the matter. When asked directly about Nathan's impending fatherhood with another woman, I simply responded that my focus was on Ethan's well-being during our transition to co-parenting. Nathan himself seemed to be adapting to his diminished circumstances, with unexpected grace. During his first scheduled visitation with Ethan, he arrived promptly, engaging genuinely with our son, rather than using the time to attempt reconciliation or manipulation with me. He's really trying, Ethan reported after their weekend together. He showed me his new apartment and said I could help decorate my room there, and he didn't check his phone the whole time we were at the Science Museum. That's wonderful, I replied sincerely. Whatever my feelings about Nathan as a husband, I wanted him to be the best possible father to Ethan. 2 weeks after signing our settlement agreement, I received an unexpected call from Olivia. I almost declined it, but decided direct communication might be preferable to speculation. Thalia, she began hesitantly. I hope it's okay that I called. I wanted to talk to you about some things. I'm listening, I said, keeping my tone neutral. First, I want to apologize, she said, surprising me. What Nathan and I did was wrong. I knew he was married, knew about Ethan. I have no excuse, except that I believed what I wanted to believe, that his marriage was already over in all but name, that we weren't really hurting anyone. Her candor was unexpected. Why are you telling me this now, Olivia? A long pause. Because I'm trying to make better choices for my baby's sake. And because with the legal proceedings starting, I wanted you to know this isn't about trying to take anything from you or Ethan. It's just about securing what my child deserves. I've never begrudged your child support, I assured her. Whatever happened between us as adults, that baby is innocent. Thank you, she said softly. There's something else you should know. Nathan and we're not together anymore. Not romantically. He'll be involved with the baby, but we both realized our relationship was built on fantasy, not reality. This confirmation of what I'd suspected didn't surprise me, though I wondered at her motivation for sharing it. I appreciate your honesty, Olivia, but why tell me? Another pause. Because rumors are starting that I trapped Nathan deliberately, that I'm using the pregnancy to extort money from him. That's not true. The pregnancy wasn't planned, and I'm not asking for anything beyond standard support. I hoped. You might believe me, even if no one else does. The vulnerability in her voice was genuine, reminding me that Olivia was young, facing single motherhood under complicated circumstances. While I couldn't absolve her choices, I could acknowledge her humanity. What other people think doesn't matter, I told her. Focus on yourself and your baby. The rest will sort itself out with time. After ending the call, I sat for a long moment contemplating how thoroughly lives could intertwine and unravel. Nathan's choices had created ripples affecting not just our immediate family, but extending to his company, his employees, Olivia, her unborn child, our social circles. Consequences. Spreading outward like stones cast in still water. That evening, I opened my laptop and began drafting a business plan for the art therapy studio I'd dreamed of establishing for years, a dream Nathan had always dismissed as impractical. The Harrington Building had vacant space on the ground, floor that would be perfect for the venture, combining my business acumen with my passion for art's healing potential. As I worked, I felt a sense of possibility unfurling within me. Not just financial independence or freedom from a broken marriage, but the opportunity to create something meaningful that was entirely my own vision. My phone buzzed with a text. From Diana. Final divorce decree expected within 30 days. Everything proceeding smoothly. I smiled at the notification. 30 days until the legal end of a chapter that had emotionally concluded months ago. 30 days until I officially reclaimed my identity as Thalia Everett rather than Mrs. Nathan Miller. Outside my window, the lights of Westlake glittered against the darkening sky, including the illuminated facade of the Harrington Building in the distance. From being dismissed as just a housewife, I had emerged as a property owner, business strategist, and architect of my own future. The journey hadn't been one I would have chosen, but the destination was increasingly one I embraced. Not the end I had expected, but perhaps the beginning I had always deserved. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.